Arizona loses its defensive coordinator, but could that defensive coordinator or the next one already be on the staff? All that and more. Let's get started here on Locked On Wildcats.
You are Locked On Wildcats, your daily podcast on the Arizona Wildcats, part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day.
Thanks for making Locked On Wildcats your first listen of the day. I'm your host, Mike Luke. All right, now we got a lot to get to this show, but we're going to talk about Arizona has lost defensive coordinator Johnny Nansen. He is moving on to Texas in a little bit of an odd move. I think it's kind of surprised some folks that Nansen, well, quite frankly, this is kind of a weird situation because, yes, he's going on to Texas. That's obviously more of a high-profile job. Totally get it. He's close with Steve Sarkisian. That makes sense, too. Totally get that one as well. But at the end of the day, he's going to be the co-DC. He's going to be the linebacker coach, but he's also not going to be calling plays. That's an interesting dynamic because, generally in this day and age, you want to call plays if you're a defensive coordinator. And not only do you want to call plays, you want to be kind of at the front center. I mean, Nansen had a lot to say about Arizona becoming a much better defensive team this past year. It felt for the first time in a while that Arizona's defense was kind of marching in lockstep. And in that first year, it really didn't feel like that much at all. It kind of felt like every position unit was kind of playing in that same, not really like you never really felt like the defensive backs were kind of marching in lockstep with what the linebackers wanted or what the defensive line was doing. It felt like it was kind of three separate entities. And not only did you feel like it was kind of three separate entities, you kind of felt that, well, I mean, what's exactly going on here, because it looked a little bit like a Marcel Yates type defense where nobody's really moving together. And not only is it nobody really moving together, they're kind of again, it felt like every team, it kind of felt like each unit was on an island to a certain degree. But so this year, though, it became a little bit different. You watched Arizona and you knew that, all right, the defensive backs, which were the strength of the team for sure, are obviously they're all playing well. I mean, you look at it across the board from a Tacario Davis to an Ephesians Prysock. I mean, heck, Gunnar Maldonado, my bad, Gunnar, to a Dalton Johnson, Traden Stukes, et cetera, et cetera. Everybody was kind of, like I said, everybody was playing well. And not only was everybody playing well, you just kind of watched them and you're like, all right, well, it made sense. And let's be honest here, by the end of the season, it probably was a top three defense in the entire conference. And if it wasn't a top three defense in the entire conference, it was certainly right. It was certainly right there. And you kind of wonder, why exactly would you move away from that? You also got to keep in mind, too, that when you look at 2024, there's a lot to like about the potential for this Arizona defense. And not only is there a lot to like about the potential of the 2024 defense, there is you return almost everybody. I mean, just look in the secondary, look in the defensive backfield or the defensive backs from Tacario Davis and Ephesians Prysock on the outside to Traden Stukes. You've got three really, really, really good corners. And not only do you have three really, really good corners, you've also got some players coming in that I think are going to be able to be a little bit of a little bit of an upgrade. And by that, I mean, you're bringing in a Jordan Shaw from Indiana. Think he can play a little bit. And then you look at the safeties, like we talked about. The safeties are all good. And not only are the safeties good, you've also got a player in Genesis Smith who I think is just starting to reach the some of the talent level that he has. This is certainly a very nice defensive secondary. And then the linebackers, sure, you got Jacob Manu. You got to figure out what you're going to do right with Jacob Manu. I get all that, because again, he's an All-American caliber player. But, next to him, you got to figure out what's going to happen. But again, Jed Fish has shown that he knows how to acquire talent. He and Matt Doherty know what they're doing. And then on the defensive line, yeah, you lose Jacob Kongaika, who we're going to get to in just a minute. But you also have players in. You also have a player in, Atia Savea, who I think is going to slide right in and probably be right next to Big Bill Norton. And then opposite, you got Deuce Davis, you got Isaiah Ward, you got a lot of skills. So, I mean, it's a unit that, yeah, you lose Taylor Upshaw, which you certainly don't want to lose. But other than that, you got everybody coming back. And it's just kind of, like I said, just kind of a head scratcher as to what exactly the mentality, what the mindset was there. Now, listen, when you go on to Texas, that is obviously, that's one of the premier positions in all of college football. I totally get it when you're friends with Steve Sarkisian, all of that. I think nobody's really begrudging for that, but the fact that you're giving up play calling duties, I think, is certainly something that's a little bit interesting there. Now, a guy who coached at Texas, who I think that we can Arizona fans are very familiar with, Duane Akina. All right, now, Duane Akina, just for everybody out there to know, Duane Akina was a stalwart on the Dick Tomey staff for many, many years, and a player that I think alumni absolutely adore, and for good reason. When he came back to Arizona this past year as a defensive analyst, and he was absolutely fantastic. Not only was he absolutely fantastic, you watched him practice, the way that he ran up and down the field, the way that he engaged with the team. It just felt like, Duane Akina was back in his rhythm. Duane Akina was back doing what he wanted to do. And, from an Arizona fan perspective, it was exciting to watch, because I think a lot of times you wonder, all right, what kind of drive does coach have? What kind of drive does, and that's a fair question to say, because, bringing in a coach who hasn't been, he was at Stanford, secondary coach, obviously, and could have just kind of maybe, just retired and just kind of done his own thing. But he was super involved in all of practices. He was really, I think, kind of a conduit in making the defense where it was. But more so than anything, it was just the energy that he brought. You watched, Duane Akina dominated practices a lot of the time. And that's, that's a very, very, I think, an important aspect to it. And listen, when it comes to the defensive, when it comes to the secondary, this is a dude who his reputation, his background takes a backseat to absolutely nobody. And I mean that when I say it takes a backseat to absolutely nobody. 3 Thorpe Award winners. And you could also say, too, that the one that didn't win the Thorpe Award, Chris McAllister, was his best one. Something like 19 first-team All-Americans. Just an amazing amount of talent that he has developed. And not only an amazing amount of talent, a guy who I think really garners the respect of others. Now, could he possibly be the next defensive coordinator? We're going to talk about that. But first, Jase Medical. All right, in this day and age where you never know what's going to happen tomorrow, Jase Medical has you covered. Use promo code LOCKEDON for $20 off. Get yours today at jasemedical.com. Again, this is the time. You never know exactly. The last thing you want to do if you have an emergency is have to show up and wait for 90 hours in some place where you're not going to get it's going to take forever to get what you need. Jase Medical says, do not worry about that. We have you covered. Check it out. Jase Medical. Like I said, this is get yours today at jasemedical.com. And again, use promo code LOCKED ON for $20 off. Thanks for making Locked On Wildcats your first listen of the day. I am your host, Mike Luke. All right, now we're talking Duane Akina. All right, he would be my defensive coordinator. I think that Arizona should hire him as the defensive coordinator. Now, again, I know that you want to bring in a recruiting whiz. I get all that. Totally fine with all of that. And, maybe you make a co-DC situation where the guy comes in and, he becomes the defensive coordinator in waiting. I know that everybody wants to have the Poly connection. You got to remember, too, Duane Akina is Hawaiian. So there is that. I think a lot of people don't know that. Duane Akina is not some white dude from Kansas. So he is Hawaiian, but I think that he just makes everything go, because you got to remember 2024 is go for broke, in my opinion. And not only is it go for broke, it's, because who knows who's going to be here the following year, the year after that. And Arizona's really, quite frankly, never been able to string together 2 really, really good years. Now, you could say that in 94 and then after the Fiesta Bowl year, that Arizona was a couple plays away from being 11-1. But as we all know, you are what your record says you are. Arizona finished that season 8-4, and I think like 25th in the country. It was a disappointing season considering what the expectations were. So there's that. And then if you get 10 wins, like we talked about, Arizona becomes an even more intriguing option then for other coaches if Jedd Fisch were to move on, because again, you would show that, all right, you can win here. In recent memory, Arizona would have 2 straight 10-win seasons. And that's something, again, that you can't really take lightly, especially going into the Big 12. Now, again, the Big 12 is good for sure. But I don't think that there's anybody in the Big 12 that if you're Arizona that you're scared of. I mean, I'm not scared of anybody in the Big 12. I don't think that anybody else is. Again, you have respect for them for sure, because it is a good conference. And quite frankly, I think it's underrated. But it's also not a conference that anybody's scared of. So I think Arizona goes into that thinking that, man, we could absolutely win this conference. And if you win that conference, then no matter what happens, you're kind of in a situation where things start to look like, all right, we can, how far can we really string this? And then, like I said, I believe that Arizona can compete for a national championship next year. Now, again, everybody says Georgia would beat you by 38 points, Alabama, all that, to which I say, fair, whatever you want to say. But I will always go back to this. You saw Arizona against Washington, and Washington is obviously playing for a national championship. Did Arizona and Washington look that much different to you? I ask. I mean, because again, to me, they really didn't. If it was Noah Fafita's first start, he essentially gift wrapped him 14 points because, again, it was his first start. But then after that, he really, really settled down and he was good to go. And you could make the case that Arizona outlasted them in the second half. And that's kind of where Arizona ended up with things. So, yes, Washington won. You always got the feel that Washington was going to win that game, but it didn't really feel like it was that much different. So again, you got to fix some pieces or bring in some new pieces. We're going to talk about all that tomorrow, but Arizona is in a spot right now where you're kind of in a go for broke. And I think with Duane Akina is that dude. I don't really want to mess around with a defensive coordinator calling plays who's never called plays, who's new to the system. That to me is something that Arizona doesn't need, because again, this is an absolutely loaded football team for next year. Arizona needs to be able to get somebody that knows what he's doing and can make all the pieces fit. And that's Duane Akina. Yes, I get all the concerns. So again, you bring in a recruiter, all of that. Maybe you make somebody a coach in waiting, whatever the case may be. But I believe that Akina needs to be that one that needs to be the defensive coordinator, at least the one calling plays. Maybe somebody's a run game coordinator, whatever the case may be. But at the end of the day, the dude that is calling plays, in my opinion, needs to be Duane Akina. And again, I think he's shown enough that he's certainly got the fire. Who knows how long it's going to be here? And again, I think if Arizona is able to compete for a national championship, maybe Jedd Fisch looks at it and is like, could actually win a lot of games here. There's some real potential for me. And maybe you take the Lute Olson route. Maybe you take the route where you're like, all right, well, I'm gonna see how far I can take this. I'm just saying that it wouldn't. We've certainly seen crazier things, that's for sure. And then you can keep the rest of the staff kind of in place. Again, you had you have a good defensive backs coach. Obviously D-line coach has been solid. So again, you just need to be able to kind of keep that momentum going, because I don't think anybody wants to see kind of a drop off of what we saw, in year 2 to year 3. And that's one thing that Jedd Fisch has been very, very good at. Jedd Fisch has been very good Jedd Fisch has been very good at, honestly, addressing talent, addressing disparities each offseason, and he's done that. I mean, the first year he came in, and obviously it was a little bit of a rough season, but he was just trying to establish a culture. Then that offseason, he addressed the offense, or he addressed the offensive side of the football in a big way. And Arizona had a really good offense. Then defensively, he was like, we just can't. We're not good enough defensively. And then they addressed that, became much more solid. Brought in some more talent. You brought in some more players, and on top of that, you brought in Duane Akina, who we were talking about, and so. There was a lot to he's been able to address all of this. Now, what is that next step then for Arizona football? I'm curious to see exactly what that is because, again, you just don't want to you want to just keep the upward momentum going. You don't want to drop back into the 7-win range because, again, you were able to, and this was legitimately a 10-win team, folks. This was not something where it felt fluky or, is Arizona really that good? That kind of stuff. That really wasn't the case with this squad. This very much felt like a set or a team that was legitimately a 10-win team. This was an Iowa that sucked and somehow they won 10 games. Iowa just not a good football team. Arizona felt like a good football team, and that certainly was the case. And a lot of that too is because of the depth, because of the talent that they were able to go for. All right, now. We're going to talk about Jacob Kongaika because I think this is a transfer that caught a lot of people, including myself, off guard to a certain degree, considering where he came from, what he was able to do. But first, FanDuel. All right, check it out, FanDuel, ladies and gentlemen, FanDuel. All right, now, FanDuel.com/lockedon. Check it out. This is where you want to go. Listen, you got college football's over now, but you got the NFL playoffs here. Not only do you have the NFL, you've also got college basketball. You've got the NBA. This is awesome, full swing time of the year. Check out FanDuel. Get in on FanDuel because, again, your money's good. Not only do you know your money's good, you know it will be good. Check it out with the good folks at FanDuel.com/lockedon. Again, this is one of those situations. You will thank me later. Because there's nothing more enjoyable than watching something where you have a little bit of a skin in the game. And you also know that, heck, I also have a little bit of betting action here. Again, check it out, FanDuel.com/lockedon. Thanks for keeping it locked on Wildcats and making this your first listen of the day. I am your host, Mike Luke. All right, now. Let's talk about Jacob Kongaika. Jacob Kongaika to me is kind of the epitome of the player who just kind of makes a lot of just kind of is emblematic of this coaching staff to a certain degree. And by emblematic of this coaching staff, I mean that they're able to find players. Jacob Kongaika went to Modern Day and somehow didn't have any offers coming out of high school. Arizona brought him in as a walk-on, and then they quickly gave him a scholarship offer. And it's because he's good. Again, this isn't Rob Waldrop we're talking about. It's not like he's that, but he is a really, really good football player. And not only is he a really good football player, it's not like he's insurmountable as far as replacing. I get that. But he was probably one of the more natural, quick twitch pass rushers on the entire interior D line. And I think that he was going to compete for a starting spot. Now, you might say, well, that would have been Tia Savea or whatever the case may be. Cool. Maybe it was. I don't know. But I do know that Jacob Kongaika is a player who was going to be in the rotation. He's going off to ASU. I would expect him to start at ASU. ASU is obviously in a much different realm than Arizona is right now. And I think that he'll start, and I think he'll be a pretty good contributor. He's a good football player. But, like we talked about earlier, this isn't something that Arizona can't replace. As good as he is, it's not like you're losing Big Bill Norton or, Jacob Manu or somebody that's kind of an all-conference caliber guy. Again, Kongaika is good, but Arizona between, Tia Savea, you also got to factor in, you got some players coming up. And you also got to remember as well that Taitai Uiagalelei is still in the mix. So again, there's a lot of potential there for this team, but he is definitely a loss. Now, people ask, what happened here? This really came down to, and it's not really a secret, so I can just put it out there. He didn't get along with Johnny Nansen. Johnny Nansen and Jacob Kongaika just did not see eye to eye on much of anything, and that they'll be pretty honest or pretty upfront about it. That's why Kongaika left. So it does strike me as a little odd that Nansen leaves and Kongaika still leaves, but who knows? Going to ASU is weird, but wish the kid the best because, again, I still think that with Arizona, Jacob Kongaika is a total example of this coaching staff and about how they are able to find under-the-radar talent. And under-the-radar talent sometimes that can be at modern-day high school like Jacob Kongaika, or that can be at Long Beach Poly like a Wendell Moy. Again, it's just kind of what this staff does. They're just able to do it. And not only are they able to do it, they're able to really find out where players fit in, and they're very good at development. And I think that's a big part of what they're able to do. And Jed Fish continuously harps on that, as Jed Fish should harp on it, because again, when you develop talent in the manner in which they do, you should harp on that, because again, this is a team where you've got a lot, like I said, you've got a lot of good players. You got a coaching staff that certainly knows what they're doing. All right, now tomorrow we're going to talk about filling the holes, what Arizona needs to do as far as bringing in more players and to replace some of the guys who have moved on. And then we're also going to talk about Arizona basketball needing to play with a little bit more passion on a consistent basis. But on that note, I'm your host, Mike Luke. You've been listening to Locked On Wildcats.